Welcome to Perspectives I. In this video, we will present non-governmental organizations' anti-money laundering programs and best practices. When looking at the due diligence on beneficiaries, consider the following areas: determining the purpose, goals, and objectives of the organization, identifying where they are located and the areas that they serve, understanding their organizational structure to ensure that they are not too complex, meaning that beneficiaries are not hidden behind trusts and or other entity structures that are difficult to identify, and analyzing the beneficiary base. Understanding how the money will be used, that the funds reached the appropriate designation and used as intended. Analyze financials to determine how the money was spent. Review if there is any training on fraud or money laundering for employees and directors. When conducting due diligence on donors, determine the source of funds of the donations. Identify where the donors are located. Understand the organizational structure, yet again not too complex, and analyze its beneficiary base. Determine the ultimate beneficial owner of a donor, whether it's an entity or a trust. Understand the purpose of the donation. Be more diligent if the donor is involved in a cash-intensive business. And update your donor due diligence information at a minimum once yearly. When conducting due diligence on partners, determine if a partner organization has financial stability and complies with AML regulations. Verify that the partner organization is legally registered and in good standing. Determine partner's source of funds. Assess the partner's reputation in the industry and review any adverse media on them. Review the audited financials. Identify the ultimate beneficial owner, again looking at entities and or trusts if applied. Review the risk assessment and AML policies and procedures. When looking at a risk assessment, identify risks in a thorough assessment of your donors, beneficiaries, partners, employees, and projects. Determine how each risk will have an impact on the NGO. Every time that a project will be implemented, a risk assessment must apply to determine if it raises new risks and find ways to mitigate them. Once adjustments are made and applied, a subsequent risk assessment must be applied to determine if the mitigating policies and procedures are actually working. The risk assessment must be approved by the board of directors. And when the risks are determined, implement measures to mitigate every identified risk. Training. Training should include topics such as techniques of verifying identities, identifying red flags, emerging technologies, cybersecurity, fraud prevention, and recognizing suspicious activities, among others. Provide regular training on employees and directors, training on how to understand cultural differences, and keep employees and directors current on regulatory changes or updates. Internal controls. Create policies and procedures to comply with AML rules, regulations, and best practices. Create policies and procedures outlining measures to prevent conflicts of interest. Create a policy and procedure to establish an internal audit function to assess the operation. Create policies and procedures to monitor transactions and report suspicious activity. Create policies and procedures to involve the directors in all changes, creations, and modifications to the AML program. Independent testing or evaluation. Create a policy that outlines the scope and frequency of an independent testing or evaluation of the AML program. Create procedures for conducting independent evaluations, including the risk assessment, review of policies and procedures, and testing of internal controls. Create procedures to document evaluation results and corrective actions. Create a plan for addressing any deficiencies or weaknesses identified throughout the evaluation. Create an action plan process that exhibits how the organization implements and reflects corrective measures resulting from the evaluation findings and/or recommendations. Red flags when we're looking at partners, projects, employees, beneficiaries, and donations. Red flags with partners. When the proposal implies the possibilities of delegating work to unknown partners or newly formed organizations. When partners request privacy or degrees of secrecy on the project. When partners insist on specific professionals to audit or review their finances. Complex ownership structures. When partners demand particular payment mechanisms, such as cash or money deposits under specific accounts and names of partners. When partners request specific payment instructions for money deposits in jurisdictions where they are not located. Red flags involving projects, tampering of invoices. If you notice amendments or tampering of any document that is crucial to the project. When documents are missing, become unreadable, and records are lost. Discrepancies between budget needs and requests for payments. Project directors frequently making excuses for their systems crashing. No signatures of payments received and missing or undated invoices. Invoices recording higher costs of goods compared to the negotiation agreements. Red flags involving donations. Series of small donations are received from sources that cannot be identified. Substantial one-time donations from identifiable sources. Donations received from anonymous sources. If conditions attached to a donation are such that the NGO or charitable organization would only be a vehicle for transferring funds from one individual or organization to another individual or organization. When payments originate from unusual payment mechanisms, such as an untypical method of payments. When donations are conditioned to be used in partnership with individuals or entities that raise concerns about them. Red flags regarding employees. Employees living beyond their means. Employees performing tasks that they're not supposed to do. Employees with an inconsistent employment history. Employees not taking vacations or appearing at the office at unusual times. The ratio of employees and costs of the projects do not make sense. There's either too many employees or too few employees. Employees associated with politically exposed persons or PEPs. Employees with alternate employment that are related to donors or project beneficiaries. Red flags on beneficiaries. Complex ownership structures. Different beneficiaries sharing employees and or members of the board of directors. Different beneficiaries sharing addresses and or telephone numbers. Beneficiaries with suspicious identity documents. Beneficiaries whose family members are employees. And beneficiaries that have politically exposed persons or PEPs working for them or taking part in their directorship.